Hi there, welcome to Flute Q&A number 8 with me, Jane Kavanagh. So these Q&As answer your questions that you've asked. If you've got a question, you can either go to www.flute.school/ask and enter a question. I'll answer it on this Q&A, or jump up the top of this page if you're on my website and you can ask me a question at the top of this page and it goes to the same page. All right, today's questions, flute questions, are from Katie, Cliff, John, Brenda, and Lee. Now, these Q&As are a little bit different to the videos, like the how-to videos that I record, because when I make stumbles with my words like that, make stumbles with my words, I edit it out so that you get a nice, clean little lesson normally. On these Q&As, you get the whole hog. You get the whole me. So you'll just have to excuse my little brain farts or, slow speaking or mumbles or whatever I do. The first question from Katie comes from... See, like that. It doesn't come... My God, okay. The first question comes from Katie. Hi, Jane. First, thank you for the beautiful flute book I won in July. My question is, when should I take out the plugs and start playing open holes? I'm still a beginner, grade 3 or thereabouts. So, Katie, that's a really good question. Well, firstly, when Katie said she won a flute book from me, starting on the 1st of October, you can join me in the brand new Flute Academy. And every month in that Flute Academy, I give away a prize. The first month, no one knows this yet, it's going to be a flute book. It's different every month. Sometimes it's a sheet music gift voucher, but starting the 1st of October, anyone who's in the Flute Academy can enter for one of these prizes. So if you want to find out more about the Flute Academy, www.flute.school/flute academy. Don't go there. www.flute.school/academy. It's where I teach the tweaks of technique, the tweaks of proper flute technique that get you instantly faster progress. So more information there. Now, to answer your question, Katie, it depends on two things when you take out the flute plugs in your flute. So if anyone doesn't know what she's talking about, I'll get these flute plugs out while I'm talking. Katie, it depends on two things about when you take out your flute plugs. One is how good your hand position is, because if your hand position is not great, your fingers won't be able to cover the holes in the flute. So you can see in my flute there's 5 holes. And these plugs, mine are cork, but you can get plastic ones. They plug into these holes in case you're a student who can't cover the holes. So if you don't cover the holes when you play properly, like even just a tiny bit, it will totally muck up the sound like this. So this is normal. And if I crack even just one of those holes, I'll crack, say, this one. It'll sound like this. So that's what happens if you don't cover the holes. So Katie is smart to be using plugs in her holes at the moment. The two reasons, Katie, why that signify when you're ready to take out the holes is if your hand position is correct. Now, if you're an adult and you have full-size hands, in other words, you're not a child, you can get your hand into the right position. There's a lot of moving parts to get your hands into the right position. It's not just a matter of make sure you cover the holes. The Flute Academy, by the way, there's a whole module in there on hand posture in general on the flute, but particularly hand posture, and that sets you up to be able to cover the holes. So that's the first thing, is if your hands are in the right position, right posture. The second thing that determines whether you can take the plugs out of your holes or not, is basically biology. Like, for example, if you have a particularly long middle finger, say, excuse me for sticking my finger up at you just then, particularly long finger, you might find it particularly hard to cover this hole. Now, that it's not, you don't need to go and measure your middle finger. That was just an example. Everyone has different shaped hands. Every parts of their body is differently shaped. So you might find it particularly harder or easier to cover the holes than someone else. Your goal as a good flute player would be to eventually get the plugs out of your holes, but don't feel like it's a failing if you, for example, take out all your plugs and maybe just one finger you need to keep plugged up because you find it too hard. It can be a long-term goal to eventually get your hands in the right position, even if you have like particularly long fingers, particularly short fingers, to eventually get to a point where you can take the plugs out because your hand position is good. But I don't want you to take the plugs out prematurely. For example, if you don't have a great hand position, you might not even know this, and then you take your plugs out, it'll force your fingers into a position that is worse. So think of taking the plugs out as kind of the result of good hand position. So that can be like a little goal for you, but again, don't feel like it's the end of the world if you need to keep one plugged up. To put things into perspective, I started playing the flute when I was 8, and I got an open hold flute when I was 16. So that took 8 years. Admittedly, I was a child, like, an undersized adult for most of that time. So I couldn't have played with open hole flutes anyway. When I took them out, it took me a week to get used to it and 2 weeks before I was really comfortable, and then I was fine. So I must have had reasonably good hand position at the time. Reasonably good. Wasn't perfect back then. The other thing I was going to say is that there are some professional flute players that play with closed hole flutes. So it's not an indication of your ability if you play with open holes. So just bear that in mind as well. It's like most professional flutes tend to have open holes, but they don't have to. So there you go. Now, that's a lot of information there for you, Katie. I've got another video for you. I did a video called How Should You Take Out All the Plugs of Your Flute at Once or do it one by one. So I'll link to that video for you and you can have a look at that for some further, information. The next question comes from Cliff. He says, "Hey Jane." Hey Cliff. "Any tips on how to tackle any challenging pieces such as a concerto or etude?" Oh yeah, definitely. Bit by bit, basically. I mean, if you're an elite player, you don't have to be professional, but if you're an elite player, you could probably find a concerto and go, okay, cool, I can learn that in a week or whatever. Or sight read it through and 95% get it, right. But you are not expected to be able to do that at every level of someone's ability. Like, it doesn't mean that you are failing if you can't do that. So this is what I like to do with big pieces. I actually use them as a tool to get better on the flute. So for example, when I was early 20s, I was learning the Cacciatorian flute concerto, and I couldn't play it. I was good enough to tackle it. It was kind of just like that next step up for me. But I used it as a tool to get better. So for example, I would take apart bars, phrases, and spend a very long time sort of going backwards and forwards and breaking it up even further and getting my fingers around these notes and getting it faster and doing it slowed, doing it tongued, doing it in different rhythms. And then I would be able to play it, and then I'd move on to the next phrase, and then I'd join it up. So I used the concerto as a tool to improve my playing. In the Flute Academy that I just mentioned to Katie, in there is a 5-day course called the 5-Day Breakthrough. And it's like a, what's the word? It's like like an express version of understanding how learning proper technique will accelerate your flute playing. So this 5-day breakthrough is just like, it's a window into what you can do with your flute playing. And on day 3 of that 5-day breakthrough, there's a workshop. And the workshop that I take you through is how to practice smarter, not harder. And I use an example, a big piece in there. It's actually a flute duet called A Midsummer Night's Dream, Arrangement of A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's a big piece and it's a hard piece. There's a lot of notes. And I use this as an example in this workshop about how to pull it apart, like what I just mentioned, but it goes into the details. And it's exactly that strategy that I used when I was an adult, advanced flute student, to use a difficult piece as a tool. Okay, the next question comes from John. What are your thoughts on synthetic head joint plug stoppers? Are they really better than cork? So to explain what John means, in the top of your flute you have a cork, actually made of cork. It's covered in a silver coloured plate on this side and that side. So if you take this off, and definitely don't lose it because you need that little screw top, you can sort of see that there's a cork in here with a metal plate on either side. It's an important part of the flute. It affects the tuning, and basically it's a set and forget. Like this cork has probably never been moved in this flute, which is a few years old. Moving this cork is something that a flute repairer does. It's not something I recommend that flute students do, because this head joint actually tapers. It's not a straight cylinder, and if you push the cork in the wrong way or out the wrong way, you will damage it. If it's dry, it can break, so you've just got to basically don't touch this cork. So John's question is, if you use a synthetic one of these, whether it sounds better than a cork, a cork made out of cork. So the short answer, John, is I have absolutely no idea because I've never tried it. I've never tested it. But my advice to you is get one and test it. Try it out and see which one you think sounds better. There have been some reviews of what people think of both. And yeah, see what you think. I've never tested it out, but I might do in the future. Brenda says, I have a solid silver flute which is quite heavy. Can you recommend a lighter weight flute with good tonal qualities, preferably costing less than £5,000? Yes, 1,000,000%. Brenda, you can get a great flute for under £5,000. So I'm glad that you said you have a solid silver flute. So this flute is a Muramatsu. I love Muramatsus. There are other great brands as well. My Muramatsu is actually not a solid silver flute. The head joint, it's a different brand head joint, but the Muramatsu head joint that I have is a solid silver head joint and then a silver plated body. There's a couple of good reasons for me having this flute. One, it's significantly cheaper than a solid silver body, for a Muramatsu anyway. And the other reason is the weight. I am like you. I have a friend with the model up from this, like the same Muramatsu flute, but the model up, and it's solid silver body. And I don't like the weight of it. I find it really kind of off-putting. I don't find it comfortable to play on. It could be because I'm not used to it. And we talked about this friend and I. She said, I love the weight of it. So it's a personal preference. I would actually suggest, if you're I'm assuming you're in London, sorry, not London, I'm assuming you're in England, there's, because you mentioned pounds, there are great flute shops in England. I know of one in London, but I forget what it's called. It's not very helpful. But I know there's more than one great flute shop in England. Go in there, set up a time with them, and just say, here's my budget, and then try a whole bunch of flutes and pick your favourite. It's the easiest way to do it. It's the way I recommend anyone chooses a flute is choose your budget, go into a shop, say, what have you got in this budget? And then they'll give you a whole bunch, and you just choose the one that you love that sounds the best. So good luck with picking your new flute. The next question comes from Lee. Any tips for those very top three notes, B flat, B and C? They're hard to play and not screech. Oh yeah, yes, I do have tips for you, Lee. So if you're wondering which notes he's talking about, it's B flat, B and C. Just so you know, Lee, you can go higher too. C sharp and D. Oh, that was the worst demonstration of a high D. I can blame that on Sydney lockdown. So we've been locked down for about 7 weeks, 7 weeks. And at first I was like, yeah, I'll practice flute. But then it's kind of, I haven't been playing for a couple of weeks, not that much anyway. And that's what happens when you get out of practice. The first thing to go is the precision with which you can play high notes. But I'm not worried. If you look at me, I'm like, doesn't matter. And the reason I'm not concerned is because I know how to get the precision of my high notes back like that in a flash. And when I say in a flash, 2 or 3 days of maybe half an hour practice a day. That is what is in module 2 of the Flute Academy. It's the high notes module, and it's the exercises that I use, the professionals use, to make their high notes easier to play because they learn the real way, the proper way of playing high notes, and exercises that get you more and more precision as you go higher on the flute. So I'm just going to, at some point in the next few weeks, I'll jump in and do those exercises, and my flute playing will be back. So yes, the short answer to your question, Lee, is learn the real way of playing high notes, like the right embouchure technique of playing high notes, and then grab yourself an exercise that gives you an efficient way to practice that real way of playing high notes so that you can get, I call it the most bang for your buck with your practice. You don't want to be practicing the wrong way for hours because it's just a waste of time and it's frustrating. The world deserves to be more efficient than that. So you want to get an exercise, find an exercise that works for you, that is one that when you practice, you can feel results with from straight away. So there you go. Hopefully that helped your questions. That's it from me. I'm Jane Kavanagh. I think I mentioned that already. Yeah, what else do I have to say? Well, the Flute Academy opens. The brand new Flute Academy opens on the 1st of October. You can go to www.flute... I really can't say those fast. www.flute.school/academy. There's information on there about what it costs, what you'll learn, and that opens on 1st of October. I can't wait to see you either there or in the next Q&A. Catch you later.